Bernard Christophe was a force for change, a force to be reckoned with. In December of 2021, we chatted with UFCW 832's first president. We spoke about his life, his experience with our union, and how UFCW 832 went from 700 members in 1964 to more than 15,000 when he stepped down as president in 2002. Bernard Christophe was president of UFCW 832 for nearly 40 years. During his reign, Christophe prided himself on hiring the best employees and expected the highest degree of standards in serving our members. He believed in organizing and strength in numbers and keeping up as technology and our society changed. Christophe's start in Canadian labor is not a traditional one. His path to labor was fueled with drive, determination, and confidence.
I was born in Paris, France, and lived in Paris until I was 18 years of age. I went to school in Paris, and I took English also as one of the courses. And my dad and I decided I should go to England to learn the language and maybe work in as a travel agent somewhere. I worked in England, of course, to sustain myself, first in a hospital as a porter. And one of the things I was doing, I was performing, I was taking the stiff from their deathbed to the morgue. It was quite a deal. And then one time, one of the nurses asked me to shave the guy for some reason. Anyway, that's one thing I remember. Then I moved to Epsom Down, where they have races, not working anywhere close to the races, but I work in a hospital as a dishwasher. In any event, the beauty of it, I had a boarding room in the hospital at the same time. I think at the time in France, the prime minister was changing every day, and I was going to be recruited to go to the army. Didn't want to do that really, because my grandfather died in World War I. My father did spend 5 years in prisoner of war camp, and my cousin died in Vietnam. And I didn't want to go to Algeria, which was the place where I would probably go. So I decided instead to come to Canada and make a life in Canada. I was 18 when I left France, and I was 20 years of age when I came to Canada. I had a friend from France who was a wine steward at the Fort Garry Hotel, and he arranged for me to have board and room, I remember, at the corner of Donald and Broadway. That was the place where there was a board and room at the time. And that's why I came here, because I was determined to learn the language. Well, I knew some English, obviously, but not as fluently as I would like to be, and that's why I came to Winnipeg. When I first came to Winnipeg, I worked on Diaclin and Son, I think not far from the CPR railway station at the time, and I worked there for a while. And then after that, I went to sell magazine subscription on the way to Flin Flon with a group of people. I pretended I was a student and was selling membership or subscription to magazine. And when I got to Flin Flon, I work at the mine in Flin Flon. That's stopped there. And I didn't work underground, but I work at the mine. And for the first time, I joined the union there. I remember in a caboose, because they were taking us to the Coronation track. I was laying track on the Coronation road, or not road, but railway track. They had a new shaft that they opened. So that's where I signed my first union card at the time.
How long did you last in Flin Flon?
Good question. I think until the snow started falling a bit. So somebody said, you should go to Edmonton. And the streets are paved of gold in Edmonton. I said, well, that's a great idea. So I went to Edmonton, and they said, what the hell are you doing here? The streets are not paved of gold. So I took the bus back to Winnipeg, stayed at the YMCA for a while. And then there was a job offering at Safeway with Safeway stores. And so I went there and applied for it. I think I was working in the produce department at Donald and Broadway. There was a store there. Then I went in another store on Main Street. I don't remember exactly where. But what happened to me, a few months after I started working, I got sick. I had a lumbago, and which affect your back, and probably because I lifted things improperly. So I was still on probation. So I went to sort of beg back for my job to stay with Safeway because this was a job for me. I remember the HR person at Safeway I went to ask for my job. His name was Dowling, and he said, okay, all right, you can come back. And I worked with Safeway, I think about a couple of years or so. I ended up as an assistant manager in the Windsor Park Safeway store. I wanted, I guess, to be a manager, and I was very active. I was producing some 8 by 11. I posted that in the store for the employees to see, and that's what I was doing at the time. And then one day, my store manager, Emil Gill, I remember, said, there's a union meeting today and the union is going to take over. I said, wait a minute, I'm going to go there and raise hell.
So I was very upset about this, and I went to the meeting intending to take on the union leader of the day about whatever. And at that meeting, he obviously changed my mind, and something clicked inside, and I realized, for example, that our people were working overtime, not being paid. I went back to the store a few days later at one of the employees' house, got elected shop steward, which was unknown in those days, went back to the store, told the store manager I was a shop steward. He was quite shocked, obviously. At 6 p.m. when the store was closing, I stood by the door and unsure that all the workers walked out because we were not getting paid overtime, and it was a miracle. The store manager took over the cash register, and that was my first contact with the union. Shortly after that, an international representative by the name of Tom Rees, who was in charge of the union after the death of a leader of the local, noticed me and asked me if I wanted to work as a full-time union representative. I said I would, and I began on July 4th, 1959 as a full-time union representative.
Christophe left his job as assistant manager at Safeway and as the local shop steward to work for the union.
It was called the Retail Clerks International Association. Eventually, it became the Retail Clerks International Union, and then it merged with the Amalgamated Butcher Workmen of America, who had previously merged with the packing house workers, and we merged and became the United Food and Commercial Workers Union.
How big was the union at that time?
The union at that time had 700 members. There was an old business agent who I think quit and never went in the store hardly. Nobody knew him. And that was the number of people that belonged to the local union at the time. I worked about 3 years as a union rep, and there was the head of the union, of the local union at the time, was the secretary treasurer. That was the name of the chief executive officer in the constitution of the union. And there was a president who was an employee of the Safeway store, as a matter of fact. And then what happened is that secretary treasurer was taking money from the union, and I won't say his name just in case he lives again, and we reported him to the International Union, whose division head office was Chicago at the time, and Ivan Morris was the director of that division at the time, and he promptly, of course, when he found out what he was doing, fired him. And then there was a Jerry Otto who was working with me at the time, and he asked us to send a report of what was happening in the local union, and he would decide which union representative should get the green light to become eventually the chief executive or secretary treasurer at the time. I was driving with Jerry Otto on Ellis Avenue going over the railroad track. This is precise, I remember that. And I tell Jerry, I said, you want to be the chief executive? I said, well, I don't know. I said, well, I think I want to be. So he said, okay. And then we reported that to Ivan Morris, and then I eventually got the green light. And in 1963, 1962, I got then elected secretary treasurer of the local union on January the 1st, 1963. And then after that, of course, it switched to president of the local union.
Christophe was first appointed to his position, but after that he was re-elected president after each term in office. Those early days formed the roots of UFCW as several unions amalgamated to increase their numbers.
We belonged to an international union by the time, and I think the amalgamation did take place in Washington, D.C. The heads of the two unions, of the Amalgamated Butcher Workmen of America and the Retail Clerks International Association, got together, and they thought that they obviously had something in common, because we had a situation, including Winnipeg, where, for example, at Dominion Store, the bakery workers belonged to a union, the meat cutters belonged to a different one, and the retail clerk belonged to a different one. So it was really not something practical when you had the strike action, for example. If one union go on strike, what does the other one do? Obviously, they had to respect the picket line. And so they obviously found something in common. And that's what drove the two unions to amalgamate. And the bakery workers continue to be a union of their own, but somehow we managed to negotiate them out of the stores. And we had one union eventually representing the whole store instead of three.
Throughout all of his time leading Local 832, Christophe remained committed to serving members and ensuring that the union responded to their needs.
What is important, obviously, is not just to take the union members' union dues, is to do something for them and to give them something for the money that they pay, but more importantly, to look after their problems or issues. I mean, the advantage of a union is workers in a large company have very little chance against an employer in terms of treatment, in terms of wages. But if they belong to a union, then the union speak on behalf of the workers, but they must, of course, find out first what the workers want. And we negotiated collective agreement where there was clauses that allow the union rep to enter the store and talk to employees, either in the lunchroom or at the back or whatever. I was still under the supervision of the international representative, Tom Rees, who eventually turned me around from an assistant manager to a president of a local union. As a result of that, I remember him telling me, he said, if you go in the store and the managers throw you out through the front door, come back through the window, meaning you don't let them tell you what to do, because you're there to represent the workers. And that's something I really believed in.
I think the success we've had in this local union has been due to the fact, I think, that I have never shied away from a fight. And if I display any aggressiveness, I assure you that it's only designed to serve my membership and the members that elect me or re-elect me every year, and that's really what it's all about, in my opinion.
And I insisted that the union rep that worked for me go in the store on a systematic, regular basis and don't take a no for an answer from the manager when they had to speak to workers. I remember one union representative who told me, illustrating what you say, that she didn't like me, but she respected me, and that's all I wanted. Well, I expected people to obviously deliver. I knew many union representatives or president of other union were satisfied just to try, and I didn't believe in that. We had a policy manual at the local union, and at the end of each page, which we review every year at a staff conference, and at the end of each page, it says, "We are not paid to try, but to succeed." The union dues were high in comparison, perhaps, to other unions, but then we had to deliver for that. We were obligated to get benefit for the members, to look after their grievances, and to be available to them. I insisted that the union rep get their phone numbers available at home to their members in case their members wants to reach them. It was a home phone number. There was no cell phone at the time. We eventually modernized and had pagers, and then we switched to princess phone in the car of the union rep. The cell phone didn't come in my age, in my time, but came after. But I wanted the latest modernization, communications available for the reps to call me. Or I remember when I visited my parents in France, I was always in touch with the union rep, even from France. That was important to me, to always keep in touch. Keeping in touch was critical.
Christophe had high expectations for his employees at UFCW, and that included being politically active.
That was absolutely critical because, as I said, depending on what political party was in office, it was either favorable or unfavorable to union. Not only that, they appointed chairman of labor board, they appointed arbitrators. I mean, there was a slew of issues, what's happened during a strike situation, and so on and so forth. And I certainly did expect the union representative to be involved politically. And at election time, I expected them to knock on door for the political party we supported. And they accepted that because they knew we got results.
As president of a growing union, Christophe was also a negotiator and remembers his first time sitting across from an employer.
I remember it was with Safeway. It was a professional person called Vic Pinchon. He was representing Safeway. And he was better than me at the time. And he obviously took advantage of me at that time. And I went home and I was almost in tears. And I learned a lot from that. I think the example I can give you, if you play tennis with a professional, eventually you become very good at your job. And that was what eventually happened. I came to a point, and I told that to my rep, was when up until the last day, when 80% of the time I knew what to do, when to do, and how to do it. And that was a degree of satisfaction for me, and obviously a result for the members.
As a negotiator, Christophe did a lot of innovative things that our members still benefit from today. He started the training center, the pension plan, health and welfare plans, and notably, addressed sexism in contracts.
When I first started, I remember as a produce manager at Tunnel and Broadway, there was an agreement, and there was two classifications, male and female. And obviously the female salary was lower, and there was obviously discrimination at the time in more ways than one, I would imagine. And I made it an issue for the whole local union to change that in time. And then we changed the wages or the classification to cashier and grocery clerk. But cashier was still mostly female. So it was not just a name that has to change, it was a salary. And eventually it was just one salary of male grocery clerk and female cashier were earning the same wages. But I took it as an issue, not because it was the right thing to do, which it was, but I took it like a health and safety issue. In other words, an issue that everybody should care about. There was an injustice that existed there that was blatant and should change. And I hired some very capable female union representative, for example, because when I started, it was male union representative also, and there was some very capable union representative who were leader in their own right, which I hired for the local union. I noticed them, for example, when we had strikes, they rose as a leader in their store or in their group, and as a result, I went to get them. The union representative I hired, or specialist I hired, or lawyers that I hired to work for the local union, were not picked on the basis of seniority. They were picked on the basis of ability to do the job, to work for me. Even at one time, I interviewed a person called Gary Doer to work for me, but I guess he decided not to and become premier at the time. But we became good friends for many years, for example. But this is the kind of people I was looking for, people who rose by themselves or were noticed as very capable people, and they all made what the local is today and what the local was during the years I was president. I demanded a lot from them. There was no starting or quitting time in the local union. I expected them to work whatever days was necessary for them to accomplish a specific project, or to look after a certain situation or negotiation or whatever it is. Negotiation, for example, lasted during the wee hours of the morning, very often throughout the night. We went to a hotel and met with management, and the committee was there, and we worked throughout the evening and throughout the night until we accomplished what we were supposed to do.
Local 832's membership grew tremendously over Christophe's time as president. He negotiated the first province-wide agreement in Canada with Safeway, extending UFCW's representation from only Winnipeg stores to those in Dauphin, Selkirk, and Brandon. As a result, Loblaw actually reached out to him directly to have their stores unionized.
And after that, when Loblaw came, and they really came to see us as well when they first came. They facilitated their unionization because they believed that it was inevitable that they would be unionized by us, and they allowed the union rep to go in the store and sign the employee, and we applied for certification thereafter, which was unusual, and that expanded the local as well.
Christophe's reputation grew alongside UFCW's in many ways. He was the unofficial spokesperson for unions, and when media needed a voice, Christophe used his to communicate with both members and employers during critical times for UFCW.
And you mentioned reputation in media. I did indeed, and as some people may know, Peter Warren was the investigative reporter with CJOB. He used to invite me on his show very often, call me Big Bad Bernie, and he was interviewing me about anything and everything. And I never refused to talk to the media, whether it was favorable to me or unfavorable to me. So they were always ready to talk to me, including what I thought of what was happening at the legislature. In fact, at one time, some conservative in the legislature complained that they heard my name mentioned more often than the Queen, and which was interesting, and and obviously showed that I was active in the media. In fact, I say many times, I never met a microphone I didn't like.
It wasn't just employers and media reaching out to Christophe. Even Manitoba's conservative government of the day asked for his assistance.
When Maple Leaf came to Brandon, the minister responsible for commerce came to see me in the hotel, and I think a Holiday Inn on Portage Avenue while that was negotiation, and asked me if I could meet with a lawyer representing the company because they were going to open a plant in Brandon. And this is after we merged with the Meat Cutters Union, and they wanted, to talk to me because they also believed that they would be unionized, and I certainly accepted the invitation and negotiated an agreement. And eventually they also gave us a list of employees, just a few employees that had hired in Brandon. We signed them up, we applied for certification. So we were the legal representative of their Brandon plant.
Gaining Maple Leaf's Winnipeg plant was a big win for UFCW, but it also brought in darker times for Local 832. It was during the 1990s that Maple Leaf told UFCW that they planned to open their next plant in North Dakota instead of Brandon. As president, Christophe had to convince Maple Leaf members in Winnipeg to take a concession and significant wage cuts in order to entice Maple Leaf to change its decision and build the plant in Brandon.
I took one step backward to take two steps forward. That's the way I looked at it. We took a concession which was not liked by the members. In fact, at the end of the meeting, they burned the collective agreement, but they still voted for it, and they understood what I was doing and what we were doing. And as a result of that, we got the plant in Manitoba, and eventually increased the wages way past what it was before, and at the time that we had to take concession. I told them that this was inevitable, otherwise they might not get any opportunity to get another plant in Manitoba and have the opportunity maybe to be transferred there and so on and so forth, and the company be successful. The company also sent them letters, I must say, not at my request, but on their own, explaining to the workers why they were supposed to do that. And at the time, obviously, it looked like I was siding with management, which I partly was. But I mean, I always remember that without the company being successful, there is no union. If the company goes out of business or loses money or loses business, then they lose workers as well. It's precisely correctly building relationship and having respect for each other's. And I think I established that with many employers I was negotiating with. There were still a few small rotten employers that wasn't the case, but that was the exception. But the large company understood what was happening and knew what we wanted, and I knew what they wanted, and I understood that.
In the mid-1970s, Pierre Trudeau's Liberal government brought in wage controls, and it created a huge barrier for union negotiations.
Well, it means very difficult situation. If we didn't reach an agreement with employers, we had to go to Ottawa in front of a board to argue our case, where they would make an exception to the price and wage control. And of course, as everybody knew at the time, it wasn't a price control, it was basically a wage control. They obviously couldn't check every price in every company throughout Canada. It's the only time, strangely enough, that I voted NDP all my life, except in one time. Before the price and wage control came, Stanfield was the Conservative Party and said that he was going to bring price and wage control. So in order to stop him, I voted Liberal. But when Pierre Trudeau came in, he introduced price and wage control. And obviously that didn't work. But fortunately for the large company I represented, I had negotiated a long-term agreement, which was something new in those days. I think it was a 3-year agreement, which took place during price and wage control. And they couldn't reduce the benefit or wages of collective agreement that were negotiated before the price and wage control came in. So that was an advantage. I had no idea, of course, when I negotiated those long-term contracts that this was to be the case, but it worked very well.
Although times, technology, and people have changed, Christophe says the basics of a successful union remain the same: a commitment to workers and making a difference in their lives, staying connected with members by visiting them at their workplace and learning about their needs, and never underestimate the importance of political action.
Provincial politics is important for more reason than just the collective bargaining and union. As we all know, health and welfare, jobs, and many other areas of a country, a province, the economy of the province is important to get there and to be involved and to participate. And it's important to go on strike when there is a good reason to go on strike. I mean, the reason I was successful is because we had difficult strike. One of my first large strike was Canada Safeway at the time. And then the critical strike that defined the local union was against Loblaws, against Westfair. And they knew, employer knew when I was negotiating, when I said that if you don't give us these various issues and resolve those items, we will go on strike, they believed me, because they knew that we were not afraid or scared to convince people to fight for what was right, particularly when they wanted to reduce wages, for example, or benefits. And they knew I meant business. They knew I could deliver, and that was important at the bargaining table. I knew exactly what they wanted. Before I negotiated a contract, I always met with the committee or with the membership and listened carefully what their issues were. And we fought for those issues at the bargaining table. They were well aware of what was going on. I believe in what I was doing, and obviously they believe in what I was doing. I gained their trust, obviously, which was obviously critical. And as a result of that, when there was a critical issue, like the Westfair strike, for example, which I think started in June and ended in October, or strike in Thompson General Hospital when it was 30 below. They walked out, and because there was some issue that were not resolved, or treatments that they were getting from their employers that was unfair and unjust. And they knew that our union could do the job, and therefore they believe in what I was asking them to do. And I made sure that when the ratification meeting came, they had all the result, all the issues. And for example, when we resolved the Westfair strike, at the meeting I had a big panel and I put, "We won." And we did. As a matter of fact, they didn't get away with it, but the Westfair strike was a test. They threw at me and everything they could, and they even had made some T-shirt with my name, with my picture on it, with a red bar, meaning down with Christophe, and then my own people made the same thing with for Christophe, you know. I mean, but that wasn't the issue. The issue was they were trying to do everything they could to make sure we don't succeed, but they failed.
In addition to getting big wins for members at the negotiations table, Christophe believed in giving back to the community, and he did so by building a training center that was open to everyone, not just members.
They first started a training center in Ontario, I think in Guelph, Ontario. And the purpose of the training center there was to train employees to become a meat manager or to become a specialist in a certain way, or bakers or what have you. And the employer went along with it and pay cents per hour into a fund for the training center. So I When I saw that, I obviously wanted the same thing, and I think it was Safeway started this, and it evolved into a training center which was not just for members, but for non-members as well, because I thought it was the right thing to do. And it was also a way of showing the membership, non-union members, that what a union can do is not just for union members only, but for other people as well. Because the training center, our training center, is a valuable organization in Winnipeg, in Manitoba, in fact, for new Canadians.
There's no doubt that Bernard Christophe's commitment to Local 832's members is what laid the groundwork for us to become Manitoba's largest private sector union. We end with his words to our members, whom he has always prioritized and valued.
I would want to say participate in your union affairs, attend meeting. It's very important for you to tell the union what the issues are, what you want them to fight for, because the union is there to fight for you. But if you don't tell them, or if you think it's not important to tell them, then you won't get the benefit that you should get for paying union dues. It's really that simple.